I'm delighted to introduce Professor Renée Leon from Sturt University. Renée and I have had a number of conversations in recent times, and I think it's really fascinating to hear from a leader who is involved in a regional setting, but also doing different things with a university. So it's not just that it's a regional university, but you're creating something quite different with the Sturt model. So really looking forward to hearing from you today.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this conference, which, as I've said to Tim, is really important because the people is the main thing that matters in any organisation. So I'm really pleased to share something about people and performance at Sturt. And although this session is called Beyond City Limits, and Sturt's a regional university serving large swathes of regional New South Wales, I think that what I have to say is going to be equally applicable to any university. We all share, whether we're regional or group of 8 or small suburban universities, a common mission of enhancing knowledge and skills, building a curious and capable society, and innovating for the problems and the opportunities of our nation and the world. But to achieve these goals, we need the commitment and the energies of the people who work in our universities, and that's why I have always felt that it is just as important to pay attention to issues of people and culture as to marketing our courses or establishing our infrastructure or recruiting capable academic talent. As you will see from my conference bio, I did not follow a traditional path into the role of Vice-Chancellor. I am one of those people who Luke Shee was asked a question about earlier about why don't we have more diversity in the ranks of university leadership. So I came from the leadership of large public sector organisations, and of course at the time that both I and from an equivalent background Mark Scott were appointed Vice-Chancellors, some might have thought that those non-academic backgrounds didn't really equip us for the leadership of the special thing that is a university. Of course, every sector is unique, and universities do have important distinctiveness in their culture and their ways of working, but people in most organisations do have the same common needs, and good leadership sets out to meet those needs so that people are inspired and enabled to achieve their best. So I want to talk today about what I think those needs are and why good leadership's important to meeting them, and what we've been doing at Sturt to uplift the capability and the accountability of leaders at all levels to deliver that quality of leadership. So what people need at work is meaning and purpose, a sense of safety and security, connection with others, and to feel valued. These, in leadership terms, translate to clear vision and strategic goals, and a clear line of connection between those goals and each person's work. Open, honest, and authentic communication. Because security and a sense of security doesn't mean that nothing will ever change, but what it does mean is that people will know that they're being kept informed and that they are given agency and participation in what's going to happen at work, so that communication's two-way. It means a positive, collaborative workplace culture where people are treated with respect and where they help each other to achieve shared goals. And they need recognition of achievements, large and small. To me, these are all the basics of leadership and necessary for productive and positive organisations. And although we now talk a lot about this thing we call psychosocial risk, it's the absence of these things that is driving psychosocial risk in universities. Now, although I think these are all just the basics of a good organisation, I have to say that when I arrived at Sturt in late 2021, things were at a pretty low ebb. Like many universities, Sturt had gone through COVID and a range of serious budget challenges, which had been met by waves of cost cutting, which staff very much felt had been done to them, not with them, and which they also felt, with some good reason, had damaged the university's reputation and its contribution to our regional communities. And so, not surprisingly, the first set of staff survey results that landed on my desk mid-2022 showed both academic and professional workforce responses that were exhausted, demoralised and fearful. And I do want to say that everything I'm going to say about what we've done is geared to both the academic and professional workforce equally. And so what I said, and what I always say when I'm leading an organisation, is that the most important thing is leadership to address these kinds of issues. And that's leadership at all levels. So we set out on an ambitious course to change our management and leadership approach, which would stabilise our workforce, rebuild trust and improve the university's performance. An early priority in this process was restoring that sense of meaning and purpose. In lengthy periods of sustained change like we're in right now, it's easy for people to lose sight of what is the connection between these strategic goals in the big plan that's on everyone's bookshelf and their day-to-day activity. So we have embedded the goals of our university strategy into clear operational priorities in every area of the university, and they cascade down into each individual's performance planning and development document. And I should say, when I arrived, hardly anyone even had a performance plan, so there was no clear mechanism for people to get clarity about what they were supposed to be achieving and why it mattered for fulfilling the overall goals of the university. And now we have over 80% staff have up-to-date performance plans and review processes on foot, and that's for academic and professional staff. Also, of course, we've changed how we think and how we talk about performance. I know I'm only speaking for Charles Sturt, but I think this is pretty common across a number of universities, is that performance processes in universities have often been very compliance-driven. It's kind of a tedious tick-a-box process that you have to go through each year, whereas we have moved it towards a much more capability-focused model, and one where performance conversations are about development and when they're clearly linked to outcomes. So, for instance, an early version of a performance agreement I saw from an academic, because we do random sampling of them, said their performance goal was to deliver a certain course. Well, that is not a performance goal. A performance goal is what are the outcomes you're going to get for your students. And so every academic performance plan now is geared around student outcomes that are being achieved and student satisfaction and student progress, so that it's outcome-based, not compliance-based. But importantly, it's not just about having a plan, because what you need is a culture. You can't just have the technical architecture of performance plans. Rather, we're building a culture in which achievement is recognised, underperformance is addressed, and development is invested in. So when I or any of the senior leaders talk to staff, which we do often, we always talk about the big goals, why they matter, how we are progressing, and how everyone's work is driving that achievement. And this is leading to, and we get this in our staff survey results, much greater clarity of roles and expectations and stronger alignment between what staff do and how the university performs. And then, of course, even more reason to celebrate success. So secondly, we've emphasised that culture matters. I know this sounds obvious, but it wasn't obvious when I arrived. It's not okay to treat other people with a lack of civility. And leaders are expected to both model exemplary behaviour and fix culture problems in their teams. When I arrived, it was the tendency for leaders, if they had a performance problem or a staff relationship or team problem, they'd just refer it to HR, who would eventually come and have a look. And then it would go in a long list of complaints and grievances, which led to the problem just festering. And soon becomes unfixable. Now we make it everyone's business, leaders at all levels, to actually both model and fix culture in their teams. And we have expected everyone to learn about what our values mean in practice. So We don't just mean the kind of big values that you put up on your posters, but everyday, understandable, relatable behaviour and the expectations we have about how people will behave. And we've trained people in that so that we build the capability. All of our leaders have in their performance plans mandatory sections that are about how satisfied their teams are with workplace culture and with their leadership. And these are measured every year in the staff survey, and leaders are held to account to improve them. Areas that have results that are below par are supported and expected to implement plans that will improve that in consultation with their staff and with HR support, but measured every year to make sure they improve. And while we invest in their capability and support them to do so, if things don't get better, people then find themselves no longer in leadership roles at the university. And so thirdly, we don't just put expectations on people, we are providing serious investment in capability uplift, because I was surprised when I arrived to discover that many people in universities, academic and otherwise, rise to leadership positions with no training at all on how to do the leadership part. We expect people to have a PhD in their discipline before they even get to the lowest rung of the academic ladder, but then you can put them in charge of 100 people and a challenging budget and a big student delivery machine without even the equivalent of a Cert 2 or a non-award course. Just pop them in there and expect them to do something. It doesn't work, and we ought to treat leadership in the same way as we treat any other discipline, that we expect people to have capability investment and training. So at Charles Sturt, we have embedded training in management and leadership at all levels. We've invested in programs for emerging leaders, women in leadership, effective leadership of teams, team well-being, workplace communication, difficult conversations, leading change, safety leadership, a dedicated development program for all heads of school, access to mentoring, and senior leadership forums 2 to 3 times a year, so that we can align all of our senior leaders around the university's direction and build their capability. Hundreds of staff participate, but what matters most is not just the numbers, it's the signal this sends about what we expect and the shift in expectations across the university. We don't treat leadership development as just a sheep dip thing that you do occasionally. It's part of the core work of the university. I should say, of course, I don't think we have arrived at leadership nirvana. I know we still have a long way to go. We have uneven performance in places, and I'm sure we'll have some ups and downs as we go through current difficult times. But our staff survey told us after only 2 years that our staff were noticing a positive difference, rating their leaders between 12 and 16 points higher than in 2022. They said, we celebrate success, we invest in their training and development, and the feedback that their managers give them helps improve their performance. Importantly, they said they understand the university's strategic direction and they feel positive about the future of the university. Now, I should say these improvements aren't just a kind of nice feel-good thing. They make a difference to the outcomes that matter for our students and for our communities, because there are strong correlations, research shows, across multiple industries between staff engagement and both organisational performance and customer satisfaction. And so too in the university. While we've been investing in leadership and in strategic alignment, we've substantially increased student retention and progress. We've increased student satisfaction with their educational experience at Charles Sturt. We went from number 20 in the Quilt rankings to number 5 last year. We've increased research income and research quality, we've increased philanthropic donations, and we've increased our community and industry stakeholders' satisfaction with the university. And of course, all of this really matters because Charles Sturt matters to the regional communities that we're in. And the better we can support our students and our regionally based researchers, the more we can make a difference to the things that matter to all of our staff. We, like most universities now, are going through major change as we deal with the funding pressures that have been spoken about in earlier sessions today. And so it's absolutely vital to do that well, that we have the trust of our staff and that our leaders have the capabilities of good communication and effective change management, because it's a bit late to start building those when you embark upon a major organisational restructure, when everyone's feeling afraid and resistant. So I know that we will have some tough times as we rearrange our budget this year, for us particularly because of the loss of international student revenue. So I'm glad that we have at least built some baseline capability for our leaders. And that means that we are, and we're expecting all of our leaders, to engage actively with staff across all of our campuses, and that we regularly equip leaders at all levels with the tools and the information that they need to engage staff that work for them every day on the journey. And we don't just talk, we listen. I and other senior leaders are regularly at all staff stand-ups across our campuses, which, just so you know, spread from Port Macquarie to Albury across New South Wales. So yes, I do spend a lot of time driving. And we take questions and comments on any topic. Not all of it's comfortable, but it's really useful for us to hear what people are thinking and feeling, and to be able to respond authentically to any question that they ask. We've sought staff input, and we've received hundreds of ideas of how we can achieve some of our budget savings without cutting jobs. We've embedded transparent reporting processes and open engagement channels throughout the change we're currently going through. Over 700 staff have directly participated in organisational redesign initiatives, and we have all staff stand-ups every month to discuss the change, where we get over 1,000 people at a time turning up, and it's consistently constructive and engaged how we hear from people there. And that tells us something important, that staff are less resistant to change when they feel heard and involved, rather than feeling that it's just being done to them. And this is a really critical part of the leadership that universities need now. As Australia's largest regional university, Charles Sturt's making a vital contribution to regional communities. We open the doors of higher education to large numbers of students who never thought university was for them. Mature age, low socioeconomic status, first in family and First Nations students are the majority of our student population. We're proud of what we're achieving despite challenging budget circumstances and often unhelpful government policy. But we know we couldn't be achieving these outcomes without the engagement and commitment of all of our staff. And that's why we have and will continue to invest in the leadership capabilities of our people and embedding positive workplace culture across the university. To finish with a couple of key points to take away, I say that culture change has to be systemic, has to be embedded across everything you do from your top leadership down. Investment in leadership capability is essential for building positive, high-performing workplaces. Clarity and accountability are foundational, and that includes holding leaders to account for their leadership outcomes. And meaningful two-way communication builds trust, and it's trust that you have to do successful change. At a time where universities are being asked to do more for more people with less, in an ever more complex and over-regulated environment, the quality of our leadership and our culture will determine whether we succeed. So here at Charles Sturt, beyond the city limits, important things are happening both in higher education and for our communities, and that's led by staff at all levels of leadership. Thank you.
Thanks, Renée. That's a really interesting insights on the 12 to 16, was it 12 to 16% increase in staff feedback on managers in 2 years? That's quite a remarkable turnaround. At a point where the sector, we've talked about trust this morning and also the policy environment, at a point when so much is up for grabs, how do you keep things civil?
Well, you have to have expectations about how we'll all speak to each other, and you have to make no exceptions to that. So my senior leadership from the top all the way down, we're expected, and we hold each other to account about it, that we will engage constructively with people. And it's not because we're just making people do it, it's because that's what works. You're just not going to get what you want by yelling at people or by abusing them or by blaming them. Does it work at home? No, it's not going to work at work either. So engaging constructively with people is how you actually get results. I used to run a much larger organisation. I had an organisation of 35,000 staff before I came to the university. And so I spent a lot of time out on the front line just meeting with people who do the business, who do the work of the organisation, and hearing from them regularly about what's working and what's not. And it's a huge... You can't get that if people don't trust you to talk to you. So building that sense of openness and trust is really important, not just because it creates a good culture, but because that's how you find out what's working and what's not, and you can improve the performance of your organisation. I should say also, we don't keep people in the dark. So I know one of the questions that was asked this morning is how can you get academics to come with you on the journey of what's being done to universities and how we all have to adjust to it. And a big part of that is just making sure we all share the same information, that it's not just a mystery to them how the university's funded and that something's being done to their budget or their teaching for no reason they can understand. So I regularly communicate both to the whole organisation and in individual meetings with individual schools about how we're placed, what are the levers that are affecting us, what are the events in the sector, how we're thinking about responding and how they think we could respond, so that they're with us on the journey, not just having things done to them.
And just before we go to questions from the audience, a quick internal comms question. It seems face-to-face, stand-ups, Zooms, it's the verbal communication that gets through to staff. Internal communications via email, less successful.
Well, that's my experience generally, like I do put out a fortnightly VC message to all staff. I don't know if anyone from Sturt is here, but does anyone read it? I hope so. But we're very widely distributed. So we're across 6 main campuses across regional New South Wales. So I can't do face-to-face all the time with everyone, but I do stand-up every month face-to-face online with the whole organisation. 4 times a year we have town halls online for the whole organisation, and multiple times a year I or other senior members of staff are driving around on our campuses, and I always have a stand-up face-to-face session in the cafeteria or whatever where anyone can ask anything, and so do my senior leadership team when they're on campus. So as well as just being available to people. Anyone can email me, and they do, and know that that's a safe thing to do. So creating that no reprisals, no question's a stupid question, you'll be respected and treated civilly no matter what you ask. These all are the foundation of you actually hearing from people about what they need.
Great.
Professor Leon, thanks very much for your remarks. I'm not sure if you've read much Patrick Lencioni, but it's a perfect case study of a number of his principles for organisational leadership in action. I was curious, you sort of touched on, the value of genuine two-way dialogue with your staff. I think the sector's seen a number of examples of the sort of significant transformation, significant organisational restructure and just the amount of oxygen that consumes, as well as the trauma that's involved in that and really the timeline that those processes take place. Really, you can only genuinely do them once in a generation if you're lucky. I'm curious whether having that open dialogue in the years you've now been at Charles Sturt has actually shaped maybe some of the more incremental changes that you might make, which in turn probably means that you're less likely to embark on some of those significant organisational restructure efforts.
So I guess I'd challenge the idea that you can only do significant organisational change once in a generation. I came from the public service. We get significant organisational restructure every election. You get a new minister, you get a machinery of government change, you get new policies, out with the old, in with the new. Change does not happen only once in a generation in most sectors. And if you are in any commercial-facing sector, whole technologies have wiped out what you used to do and you've had to learn to do something new. So we ought not to treat change as some kind of aberration. Change is going to be a normal part of our lives, and it's not a bad thing. No one complains when they get a new car or they renovate their kitchen. You go, hurrah, this is so much better. And we ought to treat opportunities for change in higher education the same way. This is an opportunity to make what we do better. Now, having a whole lot of change that's being forced on us that we wouldn't have chosen. Of course, all of our budgets, with very few exceptions, are being slashed to ribbons by government policy. That's totally heedless of how the sector actually works. But we are treating it as an opportunity to make the organisation better. So when I arrived in higher education, I was pretty surprised by the amount of cumbersome process and procedure that surrounds absolutely everything. And I'm pretty confident that we are going to be able to take out quite a lot of money out of our budget, and I know that'll be traumatic to the extent that it involves people losing their jobs, but we're trying to do this in an engaged as possible a way, and in a way that will mean we've just stripped out a whole lot of really terrible, boring, tedious work that is not high value, that doesn't improve student experience. In fact, it shuffles them around a great long roundabout of multiple doors trying to find the answer to anything they want, and it will make life easier for staff as well as students. So to me, you can do major organisational change, but do it in a way that makes the place better. Now, to do that, you do have to be willing to engage with staff. You can't just come in and say to everyone, right, you're just taking a 15% cut to all of your budgets, you work it out, because all that happens is that heaps of people lose their jobs, and then everyone who's left just still has to do the same work that was there before. So we're working with staff who actually know what the work is that's being done to redesign how we do it. We have had to cut courses before I arrived. You know, there was a massive bit of course cutting that occurred in response to the budget downturns of COVID, and that was very much just done from the top down, and as a result, everyone was just totally demoralised by that. Now, I know lots of universities, including regional universities, are having to cut courses that are not viable, and that is because of the things that Luke Shee spoke about this morning, about the government just not understanding how their funding formulas play out in practice. And so that's something that, at the same time as we're responding to it, we're busily advocating for better policy from government.
Liz Barre, and thank you very much for a very interesting talk, and I wish you well, because I think it's great to see somebody optimistic about the future. But my question's a bit about pessimism, and that... Would you believe it?
I'm the wrong person. I'm the wrong person to ask.
And that is, there's this recent survey of psychosocial views or perceptions by staff in Australian universities, and admittedly it's only compared with the Wheat Board and I think a health benefits organisation. It still looks pretty grim. What's your reading of the causes of that sense of unease, and what do you think the sector generally should be doing?
Well, of course, I can't speak about every other university, and so I'm reluctant to start saying that any of the things I saw when I arrived at Charles Sturt are universal across the sector, because I don't know if they are. But when I have spoken to people from other universities, my experience of finding that most people had not ever had any training for leadership does seem to be pretty common across the sector. And that, coming from the Commonwealth Public Service, that just boggles my mind. Like, you cannot expect people to lead large and complex teams and organisations unless you invest in their capability to do it. And you recruit for it, and you promote for it, and you train for it. So, as I said in my remarks, a lot of the things that we now call psychosocial risk, they're just the obverse of good leadership and communication. So if we invested more across the sector in leadership and promoted people to leadership positions only when they can demonstrate those capabilities, I think we would find that all of our people would be having a much better experience at work. We also need to start being honest with each other, if I can just make a bit of a plug for this across universities, because I have exited a number of people from my organisation, and then I have seen them pop up in other universities and no one rang me for a reference check. And I have rung other universities for reference checks on people who I've then employed who've been woeful at leadership and who I've had to exit. So can we all just make a commitment to be honest with each other across the sector about people's leadership capabilities and to ask about that before you recruit or promote people? Because I always ask when I do referee checks, so what are their people management skills? And unless the answer to that is 100% good, they're not coming into my organisation. I don't know if we've got that standard across the whole sector, and we should.
Thanks, Renée. It's Emma Koval from Deakin, and yeah, we've just experienced some major workplace change that did go very badly. I suppose just your comment about being honest on the phone, it is a real moment of truth when you're potentially getting rid of someone who you might not want in your organisation, but yeah, passing them on to somebody else, it's not the right thing to do. I just had a question around kind of your experience from government into higher education, and yeah, you've beautifully kind of outlined this new approach to leadership that we'd all, I think, really love to see, and it will be interesting to see how it goes when you are doing serious change, because I think one difference from government to higher ed is the sense of job security that we have in higher education, and the idea of that constant change gets a lot of pushback. So yeah, what happens when you will come up against pushback from staff, from unions? You know, how does your leadership approach then deal with that?
Well, my sort of tenets about this is that you have to always, about change or anything else, you have to always just be reminding people where we're going. Like, what is the purpose that unites us? And so we're very united across the university about our commitment to quality experiences and outcomes for our students and research outcomes that matter for our communities. And so we make sure that everything we do, we keep anchoring to that. So obviously we cannot continue to serve our regional communities if we go broke. And Charles Sturt is not a rich university with, $1 billion in the bank to prop us up through whatever comes. We are a struggling regional university that is making do on the smell of an oily rag, and everyone knows that. You can see it in our crumbling infrastructure. You can see it in the kind of innovation everyone has to do to keep things held together with Band-Aids. And we do it and we're proud of it and we're achieving great results with it. But we have to be realistic with staff that we cannot successfully do that and keep doing it in ways that absolutely matter for regional New South Wales unless we stop spending more than we earn. And what we earn has been seriously undercut by the loss of something like $35 million in net bottom line from international students. So it's just a reality. It's just a reality. We don't cut anyone's jobs if we don't need to. So we've been very upfront with people about where we are, where we have to get to. And secondly, we keep open communication so that people can ask questions. We give as much information as we can. We put everything out on the intranet. They can come to an all-staff stand-up with the Vice-Chancellor every single month. And we keep on putting out more information as we work out what to do. And we are not doing any of these cuts arbitrarily. We are conducting engagement sessions with staff to identify how work could be changed so that we could do it with fewer people and still get the best outcomes for students and for our communities. So, of course, when it actually comes to change proposals and people see their jobs with a cross through it, that is going to be hard, and we absolutely understand that. But no one will feel blindsided by that, or that they just had no idea where that came from, or that it seems totally arbitrary and unfair, because we've engaged with everyone all the way through. And as I always say to them, write a letter to your local MP. Tell them education matters and the government should support the higher education sector a bit better.
Fantastic. I think that's a brilliant note to leave it on. Thank you so much, Renée, for a candid and very interesting insight.